Hello, students. This week, week 9, we're going to be focusing on sexuality and intimate relationships. And so, going along with that topic, we're going to be looking at 2 chapters from your Crooks and Bauer textbook. The first one is chapter 7. So, for chapter 7, love and communication in intimate relationships. The chapter kind of starts off with this poem by William Butler Yeats, What is Love? Which is pretty interesting. The chapter talks about different types of love that we can sort of maybe identify with a little bit, and some things that you might see potentially with clients: passionate love, compassionate love, and sort of some of the differences between the two of them. And so the first critical thinking question is, what do you think are the key differences between passionate love and compassionate love? How do these characteristics fit into a list of things that you believe are essential in a successful, lasting love relationship? And so doing some self-reflection on that can be really important, so that when we're working with clients, either in couples or in relationship with one another, or even individuals talking about these kind of relationships, you have a good sense of where you're coming from and the assumptions that you make, so that you don't then put them onto clients. The next section gets into Sternberg's triangular theory of love, which looks at the different areas of passion, intimacy, and commitment, and how those kind of come together. And so the connection between passion and intimacy is romantic love. Intimacy is liking, intimacy alone. And then when you combine intimacy and commitment, you come to compassionate love. And then when you look at commitment alone, that's empty love. When you look at commitment and passion, that's fatuous love. And then when you look at passion alone, it's infatuation. And then when you look at a combination of all of them, it's consummate love, because it includes intimacy, passion, and commitment. So all of those factors all into one. And so this is on 175. My paper's flying everywhere. 175 of your textbook right here. And so it shows you how the different kinds of love are connected to these different areas, these parts of what makes up healthy relationships. And so that's a really good topic to get into and take a look at. And you can think about both situations in your life where you've seen this play out, and situations maybe in other people that you know of, how this plays out. The next topic that the chapter gets into is Lee's styles of loving, which is a little bit of a different theory on that. And Chapman's 5 love languages. And it's possible that you've heard of the 5 love languages. They've grown in popularity. Chapman wrote one book and then wrote a book about, men specifically in their 5 love languages, and love languages between coworkers and parents and all of these other things. And so Chapman has gotten pretty popular with that. This is used pretty commonly in relationship counseling and things like that. So the next part of this talks about falling in love, why and with whom. So the critical thinking question is, have you ever been in love? How did you meet your partner? And what factors drew you together? So the whys and with whom. This gets into the topic of the chemistry of love, how proximity plays a part, similarities, reciprocity, physical attractiveness. So all of these different factors that tend to play into who we are attracted to. And then it gets into the final topic in that larger topic area of how the internet has changed who we fall in love with. And so some of you in this class may be much younger than myself. When I was growing up, you basically met people who you had class with or you worked with or things like that. But when I was in high school, the internet became more and more popular for meeting up with people you didn't know. And so those of you who may remember, I'm totally aging myself here, but AOL Instant Messenger came out, and you were able to connect with other people, based on their location and their interest and things like that. And so you were able to meet people that way. And then there came dating websites and dating apps and all of this stuff. And here we are today. And so a lot has definitely changed with how we meet people and get into relationships because of the advent of the internet and different technological means. The next section gets into love and styles of attachment and the way that we attach to people. And so there's definitely attachment that's related to when we're children and how we attach or don't attach or attach in unhealthy ways with parents. But then this sort of plays out in our intimate relationships, definitely our intimate relationships, but also in friendships and things like that when we are growing up and as adults. So in page 185, it has the impact of attachment styles on your intimate relationships and the ways that we can kind of be securely attached adults, anxious, ambivalent adults, or avoidant adults, and how that sort of plays out. And so being able to be securely attached obviously helps the relationships that we get into and we stay in and that we maintain. Whereas the anxious and ambivalent and avoidant adults it tend to have a little bit more trouble with relationships overall. Is it possible to make people fall in love? Another kind of topic that we're going to get into. Issues in loving relationships. So what's the relationship between love and sex? So we talked about attraction and being in love and what that means, but how does that relate to sexuality? Can there be sexuality without love and love without sexuality? Or do we have to have both? Or where are you at with that? And so this is another area that's really important for self-reflection so that you have a good idea of what your personal beliefs are and so that we're not putting them on clients. So one of the little highlighted areas that they talk about is friends with benefits, which has lots of different colorful names and nicknames. And so there are some people who feel like this shouldn't exist or this is not okay. And so you want to make sure you know where you're at before you get involved with a client who starts talking about a friend that they have with benefits. And then you start maybe putting some of your own ideas or thoughts on that. Do personal attributes differentiate views of sex and love? And the critical thinking question is, what do we know about gender differences in people's views of sex and love? And do these differences depend on sexual orientation or affectional orientation? And so this is another thing that's really important, is that in a lot of ways people will talk about the stereotypes of how men behave in relationships or women behave and what different expectations they have. And is this really true across the board? Do those stereotypes exist for a reason? And then what happens when we have individuals who don't identify as male or female? They might identify as neither or both or fluidity or some kind of gender expansive range, right? And so they wouldn't neatly fit into these categories. And then also, are those very heteronormative? So do we have these ideas of what women and men see in relationships coming from the heteronormative perspective? Or are we looking at relationships that are not one man and one woman, right? And so how does that differ in LGBT individuals and in their relationships? Gets into jealousy in relationships. The critical thinking question there is, research indicates that women are more likely than men to acknowledge feelings of jealousy. What do you think accounts for this difference? So it's interesting that the textbook went from, let's talk about how these are very cisgender and heteronormative viewpoints, to specifically asking a question about the differences between men and women. Interesting. Anyway, so what do you think accounts for differences between individuals and their levels of jealousy? My guess is it's not about biology or genetics or any of those things, but more about messages that we've received and how we should behave and how things should be. And also the gendered hierarchy that exists in our society, that cishet white men are in a much more privileged hierarchical position over other gender identities. So kind of an interesting topic to delve into. Maintaining relationship satisfaction. So, it's really well known that when relationships last a bit longer, some of that initial fire and spark sometimes dwindles or fades out a bit. And so, what do we do with that? How do we maintain relationships that we really care about and want to be in when some of that starts to die down a bit? There's a separate box section in here. Let's talk about it. Coping with jealousy, the green eyed monster. So, that's kind of a branch off of that jealousy topic. And then we get into sexual variety, an important ingredient. So, how do we spice things up sexually to make things interesting and continue some of that spark going? That's a pretty big topic that you can get into because some people spark it up with their partner directly, get into different types of, you know, new and different behaviors, or maybe rekindling some old behaviors that maybe we haven't done in quite some time, but also could get into some kinks and things like that. And how do you learn about that and appropriate use of that and engagement? It could even mean engaging in the realm of polyamory or consensual non-monogamy. So lots of different topics could be present there that aren't quite discussed here. Next is the importance of sexual communication. A lot of times people feel like they don't need to talk about it. It just happens when it happens, or, talking about it kills the mood or the whatever, the spark, the interesting, spontaneous nature of it. But talking about it is important. And that gets into the topic of, there's a little box here about consent. And that consent should be ongoing. It should be verbal. It should be enthusiastic and freely given, not coerced, things like that. And so how important that is with talking, but also talking about, how do we talk about sex, and what are our histories if we want to share them, and what are our experiences if we want to share them, what do we want to engage in together. This is a really great resource. I'll try to remember to post below, but if I don't, remind me, message me and ask me. But the yes, no, maybe. And so this is a really great resource that you can use for yourself, but also for clients, to help them work together on, like, what kind of behaviors and things am I absolutely okay with and love and enjoy and want to do? What are things that I'm like, no, absolutely not? And what are the things I'm like, maybe not into, but they're okay, or I do it for the right partner? And those things are really important to know about yourself and to know about your partner before you start engaging in behaviors, and confusing things happen and people break people's boundaries. Let's talk about it first, right? Again, going way back, dating myself, it was said in the late 80s, early 90s, let's talk about sex, right? That song meant something. How to listen and give feedback, being an active listener, maintaining eye contact when you're having these conversations, providing feedback to the other person, supporting them in their efforts to make that communication happen, and expressing unconditional positive regard, regardless of what's kind of coming up. Discovering your partner's needs, asking questions, avoiding why. Like, why do you like that? Why would you want to do that? That's really judgmental. Sometimes asking yes or no questions can be difficult. Like, do you like oral sex? They could say, yes, I do, or no, I don't, but it doesn't get into the nuances of it. Like, oh, it sounded like you enjoyed that. What did you like? Was there something that you didn't like that I should kind of like minimize? And just kind of yes or no questions can tend to close things. And so open-ended questions are a little better. Sometimes either or questions can be helpful. Like, would you like to do this or this? That doesn't always give the opportunity for someone to say, well, neither. Like something else. Self-disclosure, what is appropriate and at what points, and how do you feel with that? Do you want to be completely open and honest? There's lots of reasons why we should, especially with things like STDs and all of that. Discussing preferences, giving permission. How do I give permission? Learning to make requests of your partner, taking responsibility for your own pleasure and saying, hey, I like this, let's do that. Or, I really enjoy it when you do this, I'd like you to do that more. Or even making direct requests, hey, I'm really in the mood for this, let's do it. What do you think? Using I language is important. Kind of puts off the defensiveness and allows the person to be a little bit more open to discussing things. Expressing, receiving compliments, instead of when someone compliments you, oh, whatever, you're just saying that, oh, don't make me blush, whatever. Just saying, you know what, thanks. Accept that compliment when you get it. Constructive strategies for expressing complaints, choosing the right time and place to have those conversations. The benefits of affectionate communication is a little box off here. Temper complaints with praise. So like, oh, I really love it when you do this. When we get into that, you know, that's kind of uncomfortable for me and I don't really enjoy it. But, you know, when we stay here, like that's really good and I really love that. And so let's keep doing that. Critical thinking questions. Some people think that combining praise with a complaint is manipulative or a coercive behavior. Do you agree with this point of view? Why or why not? So really critically thinking about that. I think that's important, especially as you're like, you know, in a master's program, you're getting ready to get into your field and your profession, using those questions that pop up in our head and saying, do I really believe this at face value? Or are there situations where this doesn't fit? Or why is it the textbook telling me this? Always question things. It's a really good thing to do. Helps you be curious, especially when you're working with clients. Like, I want to know a little bit more about that. Tell me about that history. What's going on there? It helps us to be really good, attentive clinicians. Receiving complaints, how do we receive them? Do we get defensive? Do we flip out? Good thing to do. Acknowledge, find something to agree with, ask clarifying questions, also expressing your feelings, focus on a future change that you can make, and how to say no when different things come in, things that are just out of your comfort zone. So it talks about a 3-step approach to saying no. It also gets into nonverbal sexual communication and ways that we can kind of give or pick up cues from that. It's important to do the talking, but some of this stuff helps clue us in as well. And so we want to be reading both the nonverbal and the verbal communication and not sticking to one or the other. Communication patterns in both successful and unsuccessful relationships, such as constructive communication tactics, leveling and editing, validating, volatile dialogue, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, belligerence. Some of those you're going to be able to recognize off the bat are unhealthy, are going to just stop that communication where it stands. And that's it for 7. A lot of content. Getting into 8, it ties to some of those topics, sexual behaviors, and so what behaviors are we willing to engage in and not, and what are we okay with? Celibacy and different types of celibacy, because celibacy means different things for different people. It's important to understand that. The role of erotic dreams and fantasies and what they mean, the different functions of fantasy and what they can play. Again, it kind of goes into this gender differences between and similarities between sexual fantasies, whether they're a help or hindrance with our sexual behaviors. Masturbation and the role that this plays. There's an interesting picture of an instrument on here. When you look at page 220, it's a lockable metal genital pouch with leather straps, patented in 1910, designed to prevent masturbation by patients in mental hospitals. So what do we think about that? Do we feel like people who are in hospitalizations or long-term care should be prevented from expressing themselves with themselves? Should be a thought question on here. The purpose of masturbation, ethnicity and masturbation, different ideas about masturbation that have been passed on through different cultures and ethnicities and even religions and stuff. It doesn't get into that here, but it's an important thing to know, especially if there are clients that need to discuss this. They may be holding back because of these beliefs and stuff like that. Talks about different techniques for those with, well, they say men and women, but those with a penis and those with a vulva. Shows different types of toys in here. An old one, this phallic shape was found at a Stone Age settlement in Sweden. It is carved from deer antler and is believed to be a 6,000 to 8,000 year old dildo. So this has been happening for a long, long time. Probably since the beginning of man, beginning of human. Sexual expression, the importance of context, the context of sexual expression. So in what situations might we be willing to do and not do things? So I talked about that yes, no, and maybe chart. There might be situations where, yes, I'm down for that, but only with someone I have this type of relationship with or something like that. And so it gives a little chart here about the top 15 reasons that college men and women had given for engaging in intercourse. And so attraction, wanted to feel the physical pleasure, it feels good, show affection to to the other person, or express my love for the other person. I was aroused, wanted the release, I was horny, it was fun, I realized I was in love, it was in the heat of the moment. There's lots of different reasons that we engage in our behaviors. And so what do you think are good reasons, and how do you not kind of put that on our clients when they have other reasons that they want to have sex? Frequency, so it talked about what the frequency is based on these different studies, and then the different behaviors. So kissing and touching, right, are two different sexual behaviors. They don't have to be, but they can be. Manual stimulation of the genitals, oral genital stimulation. So it gets into that topic a little bit more on both individuals with a penis or with a vagina. It's a table that factors affecting taste of ejaculate. So depending on what the individual eats can kind of change the taste. There's a little breakout box on sexuality and diversity. We kind of talked about that before. Oral sex experiences among American men and women, and kind of looking at ethnicity, education, and marital cohabiting status and how that impacts it. Then it gets into anal sex, play, and penetration, and vaginal intercourse. And that all of these can be considered sex. And most times when people talk about sex, they talk about, penis vagina sex. That is what sex is. But they kind of forget that there's all these different forms of sex, right, that we can be engaged in. And so this goes into all of that. Gets into kink a little bit, what that means, vanilla sex versus kink sex, say versus and kink sex. Intercourse in the tantric way. I know that we had a podcast early in the semester about tantric sex, and so this gets into a little bit of that, but if you had listened to that podcast, you might have a little bit more of a knowledge of it. And then again, the summary of the chapter, and that is it for this chapter. Now, for this week, we also have some quickies chapters to read, 5 to 7. If I can find them. 5, healing the relational wounds from infidelity, an important topic when we talk about relationships. Why someone is unfaithful, and we talked about jealousy and stuff. So this goes over some cases where there was infidelity and how the people were able to move through it. 6, brief therapy with consensually non-monogamous couples. So getting into that topic a little bit more about the different types of consensual non-monogamy and how that affects the relationships. And then the final chapter in quickies for this week is because choice, the internet as the other in personal relationships. Very interesting topics. So all about relationships this week. So what we're going to do is, for our assignments this week, is that we have a podcast discussion that is going to give you the option of 2 different podcasts you can listen to. You can listen to both if you want, but about relationships, relationship issues. And the other reading for this week is the IAMFC ethical codes, which is really important whether you are a marriage and family therapist or not, because chances are you may end up working with couples here and there or people in relationships. Excuse me. And so that kind of ties to some issues that relationships might come into counseling with, or even individuals might come into counseling with, for our podcast discussion this week. And then we have our quiz 3, which is related to all of our readings and work for chapter 7, 8, and 9. There's an announcement posted with all of the study guides so that you have them to prepare for this quiz, and the quiz will be open all week. So you have all week to do it, even though it says initially in the semester we were going to do Friday to Sunday, but went ahead and opened them for the whole week. So that is it for this week. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. Other than that, have a great week. We're going to be getting together next week for a Zoom meeting for week 10, our final Zoom meeting of the semester. And then you'll get a video from me again in weeks 11 and 12. Thank you.